Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our NMP Talk Show. It gives me great pleasure to
It
introduce
is.
our guest host today. We've got Tebogo Morapedi and Sinovuyo Mhuri. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
It's always fantastic to have these book review dates, eh? So today we're doing our dates. It's a book review. We've got our special guest, Caitlin, whom will allow to introduce herself. Caitlin, welcome to the studio.
Ladies, thank you so much for having me. It is really such an honor to be part of this show.
Great, great. You know what? It is fantastic. I know these ladies have got something fantastic, great questions, and I know you are ready to actually help us understand you better as a poet. But would you like to take us through, give us a background of yourself as a poet?
Well, I think myself as a poet, that's not really an identity that I've fully developed yet. It's really nothing similar to what I do in my day to day.
Okay.
Honestly, poetry for me is it's a creative outlet. It's something that I've used for a few years without really knowing that I've used it as a form of therapy. And honestly, this collection, it's been 15 years in the making of just bits and pieces that I've written that I just decided to put together into a collection. So Caitlin the poet, I don't really know that she exists. It's just a piece
But
of
we've
me.
got her today.
I will do my best.
Oh no, that's great. It's great to know. So, what inspired to write? I heard you mention that it's therapeutic for you, but what inspired you mostly?
Well, I think what inspired me most to write is actually reading very touching, deep, emotional pieces, whether it
Mhm.
be books or pieces of poetry. I really appreciate the English language, and I appreciate how beautiful turns of phrase can actually make you feel something. And, when you are reading an essay or a novel, there's the story has face value, and that's kind of where it ends. But with poetry, there's so many different layers. You can take it as the literal interpretation, you can take it as something more abstract. And I think that is it's always fascinated me how you can play with the language and bring across a few different ideas using simple words.
Oh, fantastic! So, is there any particular poem that holds special meaning for you? And if there is, what inspired it, and what message were you hoping to convey?
Well, for me in this collection, there's a few that, I mean, look, or everything in the collection is a piece of my life or it's something that I've observed or witnessed. But the one that I still get really emotional when I read it or when I think about it is My Dad and the Dog. Because that poem, it's about how my father changed from the person that he was when we were very young to how he was when we were slightly older and eventually ending with his death. And that was actually, I mean, it sounds like a silly concept, but it was linked to the loss of my dog as well. And I think the saddest thing for me when I wrote that poem is not the loss of my dad or the loss of my dog, but the loss of our childhood, because we had to change and grow up really quickly. And, those are days we will never get back. And I'm sure that the same goes for everyone in the room, that when you were a child, things were easy and they were fun, and you had the world was your oyster. You could play from sun up to sundown, and then something happened, or you suddenly had to grow up. And now everything is very serious. There's no more time for playing and having fun. We have to be serious now. And I think for me, that's the thing that I grieve the most about my journey to this point.
That's
Great.
so
Sino, do
poignant.
you have anything to say about this?
Yes. I was very moved by a lot of your poetry. So symbolic. And I saw
Yeah,
the
thank
title,
you.
it made me think quite a bit. It says they're pieces of me. So, what inspired that title when you were thinking of putting this poetry collection together?
Um, well, to be honest, I didn't actually have a name in mind when I sort of threw everything together.
Yeah.
But because it's such a mismatch of different things, I mean, you have poetry about the weather and
Mm.
about nature and about animals and family relationships and death. And it's all these like different pieces,
Yes.
which didn't really follow a theme. And everything in this collection is a piece of me. So for me, when the name sort of came to me out of the blue, it was sort
Really.
of a bit symbolic of the fact that it is a bit jumbled up. It's all these different weird pieces of poetry,
Mm.
but it's also all the different pieces of me that I've tried to put back together through poetry.
Oh, like a puzzle, or but when it comes together, it culminates in one individual person. Very good. So I noticed also you're talking about how there's different parts of poems that have different subjects, but it seems like there's a sequence that goes in terms of the things you were going through in your life. Um, so is there any was there a rhyme or reason to that sequence in which the poems are put together in the collection?
Well, it's not chronological. I tried to sort of start with more the nature poems, something that's sort of easy, because um, you've read it, so you know it goes from
Mm.
being very light and happy to being pretty dark. So I sort of tried to group everything by theme as far as I could.
Okay.
So in the beginning, there will be poetry about nature and
Mm.
about the seasons, and then we move into something that's more kind of like introspective and where do I stand in this big world, what is my relationship with myself.
Mm.
There's a section on love poems, there's a section on family relationships, and then sort of ending with the darker stuff, depression
Mm.
and death.
All right.
So I sort of try to put it so that you like ease in, and it's not just the first thing you open the book and there's like
You
this
did a
really
very
deep,
good job.
dark poem, which is
To me, it looked very purposeful. Like you really did that on purpose for it to transition that way. So it was quite well done. Um,
thank you,
and in the
thank you.
introduction of your collection, you say, I have been different people during the last 15 years. And finally, I'm able to look at that girl as she grew and feel some sort of empathy for her. And I love that expression. I think it resonates with all of us. And it's so beautiful to be able to give ourselves some grace. So, did you mentioned how poetry is therapeutic for you? Did writing this poetry collection help you with that healing process of finding the grace within yourself?
So I think how do I answer this? It did, but it also hasn't yet. Because when I wrote the words on the paper the first time, in the thick of it, in the trenches of whatever it was that I was going through, I wrote them down, got it out of my system, and put it away. I never wanted to see it again.
Mm.
And now that I think I have a bit of maturity and a bit of perspective, I'm able to dig it up and compile it to be printed. And I think in that process, I opened wounds that I hadn't healed correctly. And I would lie to say everything is healed and I'm now a whole person and,
Yeah. Mm.
life is good. But I think definitely going forward, poetry is such a wonderful and beautiful creative outlet. I think if I am to write more poetry based on whatever it is I'm going through, I would like to delve deeper into the feeling and fix the trauma as it occurs and not just kind of leave it, because there's a lot of stuff that I haven't resolved yet. And
Mm.
compiling this collection of poetry made me aware of that. So I'm grateful for it. And it is something I'm working on. But
Mm.
yeah, I should have done it sooner.
So it's part of the journey of the healing. And that's good. I think all of us can really
Yeah.
say, you never completely, sometimes the stuff comes back to us. But I think the wonderful thing about the journey is you've moved forward. Or, so you're not starting back exactly where you were. So that's a beautiful
Yeah, you try.
yeah, you'll try, but if we look at some of the poetry, we discussed the first one we're going to talk about is trees. So you can go ahead and read for us. We'd love to hear you read your poetry, and then we can discuss it.
I hope I don't make any mistakes reading my own poetry. That would be embarrassing.
No, you won't.
Okay. Do trees get lonely? Those who stand alone, those watching the comings and goings of the human race, those who have no one to tell their woes, those who have been told they have no souls. Do trees ever get tired of being so strong? Those who are expected to stand forever, those who have no means of expression, those who have been told they have nothing to express. What happens if a tree does not want to be strong anymore? Those who have been told they have no choice. Would they demolish others who depend on their strength? Would their weakness be the end of it all? A tree is a solid wooden thing. It need feel nothing, it need express nothing. And when a tree breaks the rules that have been thrust upon them, its voice hauntingly sings of pain it is unallowed to feel. Have you ever heard a tree cry? I have. They cry in my dreams. They cry in my heart. Their voice sounds familiar. Oh wait, it's mine.
Sure.
Yes. I want
Appointment.
to.
Well,
Oh, wow.
yeah,
You
that
know,
was
very
beautiful.
touching.
We've got the black polo next to match as well. So,
It's true. When I read that,
yes.
it's so good that you actually read it for us, Cait, because just the emotion behind it, yeah, that was beautiful. Thank
Comes
you.
through.
Oh, thank you.
Beautiful.
So the personification there with the trees, absolutely beautiful. You can see them; they're being portrayed as these constant lonely figures, isolated, not allowed to feel or express themselves by society. So what is it that inspired this poem for you?
I think at the crux of it, the inspiration for this poem was just self-pity. You know, I actually remember when I started thinking of this poem, I was in matric and we were leaving school and I was just in a bad space. Everything was going wrong. And I looked across from our school. There was this forest with all of these trees and it was like a miserable winter's day. And I just thought, you know, I feel like they look. Like
Wow.
they just have to stand there. No one cares about them. They just have to be strong and that's just their lot in life. You know, nobody looks after them. Nobody would even think that they could feel anything. And that's how I feel. And actually, when I put this poem together for printing, I was ironically going through something similar where I just felt, you know, in this world where we all so busy, no one takes the time to actually find out how each other are. And we all just on these little islands, we all just these little trees that what I'm going through is my problem. And you would never think to ask. And I would never think to ask you because your burdens are your own. And it's just so lonely, isn't it?
It is.
Just the whole human condition.
It is.
Yeah.
No, it is. It is. And I think, yeah, sometimes even the fear of reaching out, I think there's also that element as well. So as much as you might be thinking, okay, maybe I think I should, but you actually don't even go because you also don't know what that response is. And, you know, kind of like that tree that's standing there, it's not necessarily reaching out its branches to say, hey, I need help.
Yeah.
Right? It's just like,
Exactly.
it's okay.
Exactly. I'm so
Yeah.
glad you got that.
Yeah.
So glad you got it because that's, yeah.
And trees, really, if you look at them on the outside, they look so strong. You know, like there's no expectation that anything is wrong with a strong looking, sturdy tree. So it's a lot like that in society.
Exactly.
And I'm actually surprised that you wrote this at the age of 18. It is so deep and so relevant, not just on an individual level.
You tell I'm a troubled soul.
A deep soul. But I also felt like it really, society as a whole is can relate to this. You were writing about this as a young 18-year-old, but this is what society is like, as you're describing. We're walking around all just having the facade of we've got it together, we're okay, and nobody can tell, you know. And it also seems like in the poem,
Yeah.
these trees are not allowed to express themselves. It's almost like there's a no, don't say anything.
Yeah.
We don't want to hear it, you know.
The
Um,
social norm.
yeah,
Yeah.
the social norm is just like you can't, no, go do that somewhere else. Yeah. So very nice.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was gonna ask, what did you talked about it earlier, the one that really resonates and touches you, my dad and the dog. I must say I was so touched by it as well. So it portrays a love trees represent, but that was definitely you going through that moment. Um, so the next poem, your dad and his dog, and you get the sense that the dog is very much a part of the family. So you touched on it, and I just wanted to find out a little bit more about this tribute to your dad and his dog, and how you wanted to remember them. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah. So I think for me, this was one of the first poems that I actually consciously used for healing trauma. And when I wrote it, it was kind of, I was in a space of grieving for the loss of my father. And, it's funny how certain memories come to you. And the memory of the stupid dog was just constantly there. Every time I would think of my dad, I would think of the dog. And I'm just like, well, I have to write this poem. And I wrote it, and the feeling of sadness that I got from it, like I mentioned earlier, I thought it was the grief of losing somebody that I loved. But when I reread it and actually tried to dig deeper into, but I know what happens with death. Why is this grief not going away? That's when I realized the grief, yes, it's for my father. Yes, it's for this family pet that was like, he was one of us. He was a sibling. He was, my four-legged brother. But it was deeper than that. It was more like grieving a piece of my past that I will never get back. Grieving that carefree era where the only thing that mattered was enjoying life. It didn't matter. You didn't have to make money. You didn't have to be serious. You didn't have to be an adult, because there was an adult there who appreciated the fact that you were having fun, and how that evolved, and how you were expected to stop playing. You were expected to forget how to do childish things, because now you are expected to be grown up and be big and be serious. And yeah, I think that's really the crux of the poem for me, is that grief more than the grief of losing someone.
I see. Wow. The rhythm, and you know what, you can tell in the way that the rhythm of the poem changes. The first stanza is very playful and upbeat, and it does have a childlike, sunny disposition to it, and then it changes into a more somber, slow rhythm, and you can tell there's a lot of poignancy there. And then in the end, there's a hopefulness, that we're left with. The rhythm changes again, and I don't know, did you do that intentionally when you wrote the poem, or did it just come about that way as you wrote it?
I would love to say that with my deep knowledge of the English language and literary, that I intended that to happen. That was 100% an accident. And it's actually only after reading the poem many years after I wrote it that I actually even realized that was what happened. But no, that was not intentional. It just worked out like that.
It's a poem you can feel.
Okay.
I wonder.
You see, I'm not yet a poet.
No, probably you are. Who knows?
After all these years, you're still not a poet.
at a university or something, some literary, like class, and you go through that. But maybe I can just, if you don't mind, just dipping in here. A lot of so there's one poem I particularly, and I know we didn't discuss it during our prep, but um, among all of these things, there's this one where you're showing the hope that you have within yourself, the Kingdom Song. I loved it particularly because it shows that, or from what I got, is that you do realize that you are special, that there's something beautiful worth looking for and searching, and that therefore that makes you grateful. Did I interpret it correctly?
Yes, of course. I think, yeah, so that one for me was also, funnily enough, quite an emotional poem to write because I think that's actually one of my more modern poems. And everything before that is talking about, I feel lost. I feel adrift. I don't understand why society is like it is. I don't understand how people can be so heartless. I don't understand how people can be empty and how we can be shackled to the society which is failing and dying. And it's just totally unsustainable and nobody cares. Nobody sees it. And I think with me finding my faith, that is where everything changed. And that is where suddenly I started to get answers, and suddenly all of these questions that I had, and this feeling of being adrift and nobody wants me and nobody understands me. Finally, somebody understood me. Finally, somebody wanted me. Finally, somebody, like you say, saw value enough in me to give me a place in his organization. And that for me was just like, it transcends everything. So it was and even now, like reading it, it is emotional because I still feel I don't deserve it. And there's nothing that I can do to earn it, but he gives it anyway.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it did definitely come across that way when I read when I read that particular piece. Yeah.
So I don't know if we have time for you to read My Dad and the Dog. Do we have time?
We still do have time. I don't know about Tebogo, but yes, we still do have time.
Okay. Well, I'll try to read it without crying because when I practiced it, I was already getting like all
Oh,
emotional.
Oh,
So,
Oh.
very professional. Okay. All right. My Dad and the Dog. He barked and wagged his happy dog tail, always cheerful without fail. Around the growing children played, making memories that'd never fade. My dad would smile despite his cares at the dog's antics and graceless airs. Hanging onto a rope attached to a tree, hours he'd spend in happy dog glee, pulling and tugging an imaginary foe, until out riding we all would go. Then bounding strides would come along, when called slinking like he'd done something wrong. Then happy dog smile at the scent of a fowl, off with a bark and sometimes a growl, to catch his dinner, with no success. Then as our sun began to set in the west, home to sleep in my dad's room, to prevent soulful howling talks with the moon. How we all grew, him, Dad, and we, how we all changed from what we used to be. No more happy barks, but now grumpy growls. No more secret smiles, but now open scowls. Now the clicks of aging canine bones, along with careworn human aches and moans. So our happy dog changed to a quiet, sad beast, and so did our dad, though he still spoke at least. And so we all grew and learned to be big, and forgot how to play, how to climb trees and dig. We all grew in our strange, separate ways, and Dad and the dog lived out their strange days. The dog was mid-stride when his heart ceased to work. No more happy dog with wagging tail quirk. My dad, midlife, ceased to work at all. Accidentally stopped, chose just 12 days to stall. Until giving up, he too returned to dust, as all things and every one of us must. Despite slow smiles and fast wagging tails, each of us succumbs to our physical fails. But here man was dog, and here dog was man, and I, now big, remember all I can, how each one was in their happier days. I remember the fun which in my memory stays, the love of each, my dog and my dad, because remembering that love should be happy, not sad. I remember both well, they're set in my mind, my dad and the dog, two of a kind.
That was beautiful, Caitlin.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, thank you. Thank you so much for that. But we also not talking, I don't know, we done with the poetry because you have another book that we that we want to discuss, and it really also has a captivating theme to it or title called Grab an Oar and Start Pedaling.
Yes.
I got that right. Oh,
Yes.
good. And it's a bit of a quirky self-help book.
Yes. Very quirky. More quirk than help.
Yes, that's what just but what I like about it, or at least in the book, you sort of introduce yourself very much of who you are, your life story. Was that done intentionally because you wanted to draw in the audience to say, actually, guys, my life is pretty normal. This is what I found will help me if we go through the following things.
Yeah. Because, I mean, don't you hate when you pick up a self-help book and you're like, I'm a mess, I need help, and you pick it up and this person is like, well, let me tell you how to live your life because I'm the expert and I'm perfect and I don't have laundry that's sitting there for 3 days because I've had load shedding. Like, I just wanted it to be me, and I'm a bit of a mess and my life is not perfect. But if I can help you in some small way, here it is. Take it for what it is.
Yes, yeah. Look, it's not intimidating, and like you say, most of these self-help books, when you actually pick them up at the bookstore, you look at them, and even the language is so intimidating, and the language in your book is very much friendly. I'm your girl next door. Let's talk about it. This is what has worked for me. It might not work for you. I'm also still work in progress. It's trial and error.
Yeah.
You know?
3 years later, I'm still work in progress. It's still trial and error. I'm still just trying. I'm paddling. I'm not going anywhere very fast, but I'm paddling.
Okay. So is that then the intention that, you know what, just start moving.
Do something. Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Don't just chill there and wait for better days because better days ain't coming. You have to take control. Yeah.
Okay, I like that. So now I understand the title. When I looked at it, I was like, okay, so she definitely means that, yes, start moving. And it doesn't matter if you go west, go west. If you go east, go east.
Do something. Yeah.
Now, right at part of the book, it has each of the chapters sort of have exercises as well as some tips in terms of how to get started, whether it's managing your money, looking to look after the environment, whether it's talking about nutrition, because you cover a whole range of subjects in the book. Have you done the exercises yourself?
I have done some of them. I must admit, it's much easier to tell people to do the work than to do the work yourself. And funnily enough, to prepare for this, because I haven't read it since I wrote it. I read it again and I was like, this is really hard. Like,
Get it right.
just like goals and just put your money and I'm just like, oh, who do you think you are?
Wow.
But
That
it's
part
good
is
advice, right? It doesn't, yeah, not easy.
true. There's a part where you were talking about managing money. I actually chuckled a little bit because it's like, actually, the salary that comes in you, it's not yours. Eh,
It's less and less yours as inflation hikes. Less and
now,
less yours.
today, someone was telling me that a friend of theirs, when you're talking about inflation, incidentally, with the rate hike last week, that their bond was 18,000 rand, and from last week it's now going to be 23,000 rand.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
it's crazy. It's crazy. And I
right,
mean, like, my salary hasn't gone up by inflation in I don't know how long. So
yeah.
your money's
But
not yours. You think it is. It's not.
Definitely not.
in the introduction of the book, you talk about your why. And the reason why I'm sort of going to come to the question that I really want to ask in terms of that is that you had a very interesting line in there to say that you are the average. And the thing is, most of us don't think of ourselves as actually being just like average people. We think that there's a part of us where we excel, but maybe that idea of being average and then sort of making peace with that and then getting into the implementation phase, whatever our goal is, because that's essentially what this book is trying to help us to do.
So yeah, being average, it's something that nobody wants to hear. You know, hi, Mrs. Smith, your kid is average. You know, like Billy's not average; he's exceptional because we all have to be exceptional. And so the reason I put it in, it's to basically bring across a concept of you are the average of what you choose to surround yourself with. Okay, so if you are in an environment where you have positivity all around, you will become a positive person. You will pick up on that. If you're in a negative environment, same thing. So when I mean you are the average, it's more like whatever influences you choose to surround yourself with, whether it's people, your friends and family that you choose to have conversations with, whether it is the type of media you consume, whether it's on Facebook or on Netflix or the podcast that you listen to, the radio shows that you listen to. All of these things make up your persona in a specific field. So, for instance, if I am fixated on opening my new business, I'm an entrepreneur, I want to do this. If I need to be the average of people that are successful in this space. Because by picking up on what they're giving off, I can actually fast track my way to learning the things I need to learn. So that's kind of the concept that I wanted to bring across is just, you know, you can't expect to be exceptional in a space when you are surrounding yourself with things that are not aligned with that focus. You know, and you can't expect to be exceptional if you're surrounding yourself with average people, average podcasts, average radio, average, you know, you're not going to become the next Bill Gates sitting on the couch watching Netflix. You know, it's not going to happen. You need to take in content and develop relationships with people that are dynamic and going out there and getting it, because all of those high performances will then filter into your average, which will immediately become better.
Okay. No, thanks for that. Yeah. So that was quite something in terms of when the book opens. Maybe I can talk about one of the subjects that interest me, or well, three actually, from the book. So the first one you were talking about eating habits. Now it's winter. You
I
want
did your exercise
comfort
and
food.
then I looked at my cupboard like, no, do it.
This is the worst time to read this book. Do it in summer when you like.
Yeah. So, so there you were quite punting very much the cooking and meal prep, no, because there's cost savings and the like. So where do you get your cooking inspiration? Because I know I ran out of ideas.
Well, I would like to say that we eat exciting food. We really don't. I think we have 2 or 3 go-to dishes, and that's just like the staple. And then we have leftovers a lot. I have a whole board on Pinterest full of wonderful dishes. So some of it, I guess, comes from there. Some of it comes from Johan and I like to watch MasterChef. So if they do something really cool and accessible, then I will try it. I would not say that I'm the world's best cook. That's still a work in progress. You can tell there's a lot of work happening here, right? It's not nothing's complete. We're working on everything. Writing books about it, but we're not. Anyway, so yeah, just a lot of stuff online, YouTube, and honestly, like if I can just give one piece of advice to whoever's listening, it's cook stuff that you enjoy eating, because no one should have to eat Brussels sprouts if you really hate them. Like, guys,
Thank you.
it's okay to not ever eat that kind of stuff. So cook what you like. What's easy. Cook what you can with the limited hours of power that we have, That's what's important.
Unlimited amounts of money that we also have.
That we have.
Yeah, like nothing's wrong with samp and beans. Seriously. We do it often.
Yeah. The advice about an accountability partner, I was like, oh, there's a friend that offered to be my accountability partner. I still haven't committed. When it comes.
Honestly, like as much as that's advice I wrote, it's also super hard for me to do. I'm not part of a gym, and I don't ask me to work out with you. Like I'm bad with that kind of thing. But I know, like for some people, it's great. Like if your hun knows he's meeting someone at the gym, then he's psyched to go, and he will go and do it. So I guess it's different things for different people. Yeah, I wrote it because I know it works. I don't do it personally. I'm not.
I like that.
I'm nobody's BFF when it comes to the gym. Like, forget it. I will do my little yoga on YouTube in my pajamas when no one can see me.
Energy.
Yeah, or think about it and then think it actually counts as a workout, guys, because
Thinking about it, right?
Please.
like really. Yes.
I love
And then I loved the part about self-care. I think in the recent history, especially with just the stress of lockdown and being in COVID, we sort of had to find some form of an outlet to kind of look after ourselves because of just the anxiety of just this pandemic. We really didn't know what was happening. And you gave us a glimpse in terms of your own self-care routine. Do you mind just sharing what that does for you personally? I mean, it's not necessarily meant that we follow the same thing, but I really loved how you sort of put it out and, in those steps that you spoke about in the book.
Okay. So, like, I think I even mentioned in the book, self-care looks different for everybody. It doesn't necessarily mean going to the spa, having a spa day, spending lots of money to have your nails done. It doesn't necessarily look like that. It could just be going for a walk or something like that. So for me, nature is where I can just calm down and let it all go. that's where I can pray and think about things and actually get some perspective on the craziness that is life. So walking for me is very important, spending time in nature. And then there's the obvious stuff, like just taking care of your physical body, because I think when we are stressed out and we are feeling a little bit anxious and we're feeling a bit depressed because of something that's going on, or because it's just like the demands are there all the time and, it never stops. You can never get off the hamster wheel. Just taking an evening to just say, you know what, I'm going to put music on and just look after me, whether it's a hot shower or giving yourself a manicure or a pedicure, or just making yourself look good actually helps you to feel good as well. I don't know really why, but it's just the fact that you are saying, okay, you know what, this is my body and it's a gift and I need to look after it because I need to show appreciation for it. I think that's really special. And, it also all comes back to giving yourself a bit of grace as well, that you're okay to feel tired today. It's okay to have a day where everything just went wrong and you need to just look after you. Because if you think about it, if it was your partner or your child that had the same day that you had, you would make them a cup of tea. You would say, listen, I'm going to run you a bath, darling. Just relax. I'm here to take care of you. But we don't do that for ourselves. We do it for everybody around us. We serve everybody, but we never look after ourselves. And I think, you can't help other people if you're running on fumes, if your tank is empty and you're just clawing your way through the day because there's nothing for you in it. You're not looking after yourself. And that's a system that is going to fail at some point.
Okay. I think we have a question before I have that. So in our chat box, before I ask my next question, it says, Cait, would you encourage people to write books and how will that benefit them?
Oh, yeah. I love this question. I would 100% encourage you to write a book. Write a book. It doesn't matter what it's about. It doesn't matter if it's rubbish. Write it. Because this has been one of the most difficult, horrific things I have ever put myself through. Setting myself a deadline, saying, this is what I want to put onto paper. You have these thoughts that come and go and you don't know how to tie it in. And you learn so much about yourself. It doesn't matter what the end product looks like. I mean, honestly, like, I think I even selfishly mentioned it in the book. I wrote the book for me, okay? And not for everybody else. I wrote it for me. Because it was just something, we all say, I should write a book. I should write a book. And then one day I sat down and I said, you know what, Caitlin? Stop it. Write the book. Set yourself a deadline. Set yourself a plan. And do it, because you are just like everybody else saying, I should. Just do it. It was really hard. It's something that it's frustrating because you're speaking to editors and they don't know what you want and you like not communicating correctly so that they understand how the cover should be and how the text should be. And you learn so much about your own process as well. Just, how to be more productive, because you set yourself a timeline. Are you going to move the timeline out to accommodate your laziness? Are you going to stick to it because you're really strict with yourself? Are you going to force yourself to do it? Is it something that you enjoy? It's just, I 100% recommend it. It's going to be horrible. Prepare yourself for that, but you should do it. Everyone should do it. I'm saying it really well, aren't I?
Yeah, you are. You are. And
Everyone should do it. It's going to
that is. Oh, sorry. And there was another question that follows up on that. That do you follow a certain standard when you are writing a book? I wanted to ask this with your poetry as well. Do you have any certain ritual that you follow before you do your writing?
Me? No. I think people that write books professionally, they probably do have a process. For me, it's just if inspiration strikes, I need to do it now, because inspiration and motivation are like the fairies that float, so you have to like grab them and hang on. when it comes. That's my process anyway. It's very chaotic. In fact, this book, I wrote it via voice notes to myself. I wrote it via sitting on an airplane or on an airplane at an airport, on my phone, just typing little notes of this should go into this chapter. There probably is a really good streamlined process for doing it efficiently and productively. I have not found that process. I just did it all over the place. I made audio recordings of myself talking because you can tell I like to talk a lot. So I would talk through the chapter and then listen to it and just type while I was listening. Yeah. So my process is chaos. You should probably, if you want to write a book, Google or YouTube people that actually do it properly. There's probably a good process. But I'm proof that you can be a total mess and still have
You
something.
can be chaotic and write a book still.
I'm like the poster child for how not to do it. But
Yeah. So this is more of a comment from Neo. He says this may be a total shock
Go for it.
to everyone, but he used to write poems while he was still in school.
Grab and
He thinks that
And
maybe
we
he should revive that passion.
You should, according to Caitlin, you should revive that passion.
Middle. Do it.
Thank you. Maybe he'll write me a poem.
Oh.
There.
That's the beginning, eh? That's where to start.
I think you need to demand it.
Please do know. You know, Caitlin, sorry, Tebogo. I heard you when you're writing a book and when you're writing the poems. I was just I wanna ask. Do you do your own editing? Because I hear that you don't usually go back. You're only surprised when you're reading it. Do you do your own editing, or do you just go back when you're reading the book, then you edit it yourself? Or you get a company to do it for you?
That's a very good question, actually. So with my book, I edited it myself and then had it edited a second time by a company.
Oh.
So I actually was a bit disappointed reading it now. There are spelling mistakes in it that I've picked up, that I've seen, and I didn't see it the first time. They didn't see it when they picked it up. I think there's at least 2 spelling mistakes that I have picked up, and I'm just like, I published this and I sent it into the world and it's not perfect. But I'm trying to let it go. With the poetry is actually not published. It is just printed. I'm still looking for a publisher, but publishing is also, it's really expensive if you do it yourself. So for me, I did it myself. I paid the company to edit and publish for me, and it was really, really pricey. And I don't know if somebody is wanting to write a book and go about it, I think you have to do basically what works for you. For me, I'm a total control freak, so I couldn't have trusted somebody else to edit it from like scratch, because I would have wanted to,
They will
interfere
omit
too much.
things that you want to keep in the book.
Yeah. And I mean, sometimes like some of the frustration for me was they had suggestions of what to change and how to, and I was just like, no, this is my thing. No, you don't touch it. It's mine. So maybe I could have been a bit nicer about it. But I mean, also I think, if this is a piece of you that you're putting out there, you want it to be a certain way. And, that doesn't always translate into how other people see it, or other people would want to kind of put their own stamp on it. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just, it's not necessarily what you would want as an author. So yeah, I think the advice that I could give to somebody who wanted to publish a book is, if you are comfortable that you can edit it yourself, go for it. It's a lot of work. And by the time you finished writing the thing and changing it and moving it around, you're so sick of it that you actually don't want to read it anymore. So sometimes it is nice to take a break, let somebody else look at it, and then come back with rested eyes, new eyes, look at it and edit it again.
Okay. You may go ahead, Tebogo. Sorry, I caught you there.
No problem at all. Thank you so much. So aspiring authors, I hope the suggestions that Cait has given would help you in your journey as an author. But I like what you said. Just start writing. Sometimes it just helps to, even with your thought processes, just have it in writing. Now we've spoken about just how chaotic life is in general, but you have a you have a chapter about productivity.
You're laughing, I'm scared.
No, there was one. It's almost like how I interpreted. It's not. It's like a few paragraphs, but it was talking about you knowing your own processes or systems. So what if you don't have systems?
Start. You have to start. I think, it's easy to say do this, do that, or this is my process when you know, and you're not going to know if you don't start. So do this process, you hate it, okay, that's not for you. Do that process, okay, it's slightly better. Processes are honestly something that evolve. And actually now my process for being productive is different now to it was a few years ago. And I think, COVID had a lot to do with it, working from home, all the changes that have happened in life, they do change your process, and that's okay. I think it's important to not be stuck on this is how I function and this is the only way I can function, because we live in a dynamic world and things are constantly changing. So you have to be a bit adaptable and just be, what's the right word? Just notice, I guess, how your productivity changes through the day, changes through the week, changes when you do a certain thing first or last, or play around with it until you find something where you feel this is productive me. This is how I can do my best work. It's definitely not a one size fits all approach.
Yes, no, I like that. That it's not a one size fits all process, and just with the business. I know, like, just give us a manual. Why are you asking us all the questions at the end of the chapter? Like, can you please just give me a to-do list that works and I can just slot everything I need to, right? But yeah, there's a little bit of thinking that is required, and in terms of what fits where, and when you're busy, when you're not too busy, what's important, what's not important. We have another question before I go into some of the questions that I had. Do you have to be in a certain place to be inspired to write?
Personally, no. I have been inspired in many different settings, many different headspaces even. It's unfortunate that poetry-wise, most of my stuff comes from a place of being in a negative emotional state. And I think it's because when you're happy, you're living in the moment and you're enjoying it and you don't think to document it. But when you're feeling a little bit down or a little bit sad, there's a lot more introspection that happens. And I think that's when, especially on the poetry side, that's when something creative is born. I think more on the book side, it's not necessarily that I'm in a specific place or with specific people. It's more kind of, I have this idea which was triggered by something random in the universe, and I'm just like, I need to get this on paper.
Go for it.
Got it. Okay. So, like you said, it's those fairies. If you see it, grab it, sit down, just do it.
Hang on.
Yeah. Even if it's just a voice note, you can go and revisit it at
At another.
Right, correct. And then there was also a very interesting chapter on money, or yeah, just money. And you talked about doing an audit. And
Mhm.
just the word itself is so scary, right? I mean, if we know, so it's like if SARS sends you a message to say we're coming to audit you, you get
Panic.
scared,
Mm.
right? Uh, Now, talking about this financial audit, how can we make it less daunting for ourselves? Because I think that is something that most of us do not want to be very honest with ourselves,
Yeah.
um, about what our how our balance sheet is looking.
Yeah, it's scary. And I mean, even now to this day, it's scary. I mean, we spoke about inflation and about the prices of things, and you know, the numbers just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's not in the right direction, you know. So it is scary, but the thing is, it's not going away. Whether you face it or you don't face it, it's there. If you're in a financial hole, you're in the hole. So you can either do the ostrich thing where you stick your head further into the sand and you just pretend that everything's fine. It's gonna be okay. Or you can actually choose to suit up, put on your armor, and say, right, I'm going to take charge of this. And it is hard. And sometimes you have to make decisions that you don't want to make. You have to maybe cut back on stuff or simplify or sell your dream house if that's really as where the situation is. And it's not nice. It's really not nice. But if you don't do it, the reality a few years down the line is going to be way worse than facing it today. And I mean, I know, and I know we keep kind of coming back to like my dad dying, but he left us in a financial hole. Like we had no idea. My mom had no idea what the finances were like, and we were left with nothing. And we basically had to claw our way out of this debt that he'd put us in. And we were totally oblivious to it. Had we known years before his passing, we could have made changes and simplified, and maybe things wouldn't have been so bad. So it's just, one way or another, you're going to have to deal with it. If it's court summons, if it's the fact that you have to declare bankruptcy because you have not managed your money correctly, or if you pass away, your kids and your spouse and your family is left with this big problem, and it's just you have to be responsible and look after your money. And it is hard and it's not nice, but
Yes, it isn't.
you have to do it. It's
But
nice.
it's
I wanted to comment on that one, Caitlin, but I will
yes,
leave
please.
it. I'll
No,
just live it because I deal with it on an everyday life that
mm,
we shy away from the reality, while
yes,
the reality will stay. Whether we pass on or we leave, we still have to face it one way or the other. So it
yes,
is better to do it. As uncomfortable as it is, just do it. Looks
yeah.
like we have lost Caitlin, but we can give her
Mm.
a minute or so to come back and give us her closing words. But is there anything you would like to say, maybe in closing, Sino?
I really enjoyed the poetry, and I think, as Systemico mentioned, the right word to describe the self-help book, quirky, very relatable, very friendly. I think it's refreshing in a sea of self-help books that are very, like she described, I am perfect. You can be a perfect square too. But it's for people, us human beings, who are a work in progress, and it
Mhm.
really is motivating. And definitely, yeah, the finance thing, hashtag adulting, it's tough, but we have to.
That's so true. We are almost out of time. Any words of closing, Tebogo?
From my side, I actually enjoyed reading Kate's poetry as well as the book. And it was so lovely to actually discover that she is she's a writer because we are sisters. And so it was very lovely to learn something new about my sister. So very, very appreciative of that. And yes, the self-help book, really, it's so relatable. Even the exercises are so easy. I think anybody can just take it. You can even use some of the things in there to even help children, for example, to reach their goals. So really, it's thank you so much for the wonderful
Thanks.
work.
Thank you for the nice word.
Thank you, Tebogo. Caitlin, any words of closing? We're already out of time.
Well, from me, I just wanted to say thank you so much for inviting me. This has been so much fun, and I was so nervous to come on, but you guys just made it really enjoyable and put me right at ease. So thank you very much.
Appreciated. Thank you, ladies, for having a wonderful session today. And I'm looking forward to our next tea session. You know, this is fantastic, as always. We are signing out. Thank you very much to our NMP Talk Show producer. And we're looking forward to our next week's show as we sign out. Bye-bye.